Nearly 2 decades and I'm done. Throwaway account because I can't bring myself to post under my usual account. I've asked my husband for a divorce. It all ends up coming back to his mom. His attitude, his platitudes, his unwillingness to hold her accountable, her behavior, her influence over him, how she raised him in general. I just need to get it out there in the world. In fact, no. I want other people to read it and tell me I'm not mad for divorcing my husband. We've been together for nearly 2 decades, married for nearly 13. We have 3 kids. I've been about as patient as I can be. This will be a long one, just warning you. His mom meddled in our relationship early on several times, made it very clear that she didn't like me or want me in the family, and that was made very clear from the start. But we persevered. When we got engaged and got married, his mom seemed very, very happy, excited. And on our wedding day, they were over the moon. His whole family were over the moon. I felt like I was finally being welcomed into the family. I was love-bombed by his family. I realize in hindsight that essentially I was a baby-making machine. They were very excited about when I was giving them grandchildren. In Indy, we struggled with having a few MCs, and it was a lot of pressure. But eventually we had our first baby, nearly 12 years ago. Literally from the moment she was born, she was taken away from me, by his mom, and by his mom's sisters. She has 2 sisters, they're all very close with each other, and my firstborn was literally taken out of my arms when she was born. I was told to just let them have her. She was their baby too. They felt entitled to her, his mom and his aunts, and from day one, my baby was a communal possession. So much so that when she was 10 days old, she was meant to be with her Nana for a few hours so that we could enjoy some dinner and a pub quiz together, and I didn't get her back for over 24 hours. When she was 10 days old, at that point I was trying to establish breastfeeding, and it wasn't going. I wasn't supported by anyone. In fact, the constant disruptions caused me to be unable to breastfeed. I was not able to establish any sort of breastfeeding routine with her, so she was taken away from me to bottle feed, so I had no choice but stop trying to breastfeed her. She was taken away on a regular basis. She was regularly removed from my responsibility, essentially, and unwillingly at that, but my husband never stood up for me. Never stood up for his baby. He would say that his mom and his aunts were doing it with the best intentions. It was for my benefit. That's what she convinced him of. It was supposedly to allow me to recover and so on, fully ignoring the fact that every new mom needs an extended time after birth to bond with her baby. The 4th trimester, etc. Completely ignoring all the stuff that I was telling them about attachment theory, about oxytocin, about bonding that I had learnt, and they didn't want to hear it. My baby was 6 weeks old and I got rushed to hospital for something unrelated to her birth. And instead of my husband taking time off to look after the baby and to look after me, he gave the baby to his mom. She had full-time care of my baby for 2 weeks while I was in hospital. I only got to see her for about an hour a day during visiting hours during those 2 weeks. It was essentially a battle to get her back when I was discharged from hospital, and again, everybody was telling me that this was for my benefit and that she was only doing it out of concern for me. Essentially, I had no say in the matter, and the whole time my husband never stood up for me. Never stood up for our family. He allowed his mom to dictate when I was able to have a say in raising my child, or not, because essentially, the message was, she knew better and that I didn't know what I was doing. Even I was hoodwinked into believing that this was the case. My husband was instrumental in damaging the bond between myself and my firstborn. I was pregnant with our 2nd child when I essentially started putting my foot down, and I said, this is what's going to happen with this baby. I am going to have her. I'm going to make the decisions. I'm going to breastfeed my baby. Blah, blah, blah. All of these things, and I established this from early on. When I started establishing this, I got a great deal of pushback from his family, in the form of abusive text messages, in the form of verbal attacks in person. At one point when I was 6 months pregnant, his mom burst into my house, into my living room, uninvited, and started hurling abuse at me, saying I was selfish, saying that I had no right to dictate what my children could and couldn't do, or would and wouldn't do. If she was going to provide childcare while I was at work, then she got to call the shots and she got to decide how to raise my children. And once again, he did not stand up for me. He did not tell her that this was inappropriate. He did not in any way stand up for me or his children. Straight after this abuse, he was making an extra effort to calm the waters, but not by supporting me, by supporting his family, and by telling me that I needed to change. His mom knew best and so on. And I was not to cause problems for his family, or we would have no childcare and so on. At this point, he was only just starting to establish his career. I had been the breadwinner, full-time teacher, for several years at that point. He said was keen for me to continue working, as was I. But essentially, he said the only way to do that was to keep his mom on side. The stress of that situation caused me to go into premature labor at 28 weeks, and I was then essentially meant to be on bed rest until baby No 2's due date. But the harmful behaviors continued. I found out that his mom was trying to toilet train my daughter at 20 months against my wishes. She was also depriving her of her naps. She was giving her snacks right before I was due to give her dinner. Just anything she could possibly do to control the narrative to assert her control over my firstborn. Against my wishes, and again, it was never allowed to be, I'm her mom and I know best. It was, I'm her nana and I know better. I was never allowed to say otherwise, because there was always the threat of if I don't do what she wants me to do, then she will stop looking after my firstborn while I'm at work. Eventually, baby No 2 was born 6 weeks early. She was fairly premature. She was in a neonatal unit, and she was very poorly. She had to have lots of treatment in the neonatal unit. We also found out that she had a dairy allergy and couldn't have formula, so I had to express round the clock in order to feed her. But I was quite ill. I was not allowed to stay with her on the ward. I had to sleep round the clock, wake up to express every 3 hours, which also meant that we needed childcare for our firstborn. And Emil continued to assert control over her care. I was putting my foot down about baby No 2, and she was asserting more control over no one. No 2 finally came home and I was on maternity leave. So for a while it was calmer because I was able to stay at home with both children, and I was able to establish my own routines, my own parenting style and things. When no one got her autism diagnosis, a switch seemed to go off, and this was another catalyst for Emil to assert control. And she wanted to put various things in place, behaviorist techniques, and so on that she wanted to use in order to help her. By this point, I'd become quite assertive about my parenting, and I was adamant that no one else would be parenting my children. That's my job. That's husband's job. And now this is the way that we do it. If you don't do it this way, you don't get to be in my child's life. And essentially, that's the way that we've been ever since. However, there are obviously times when we want or need childcare. There are times when they have unsupervised visits with their nana. And that are times like Christmas and birthdays where there's prolonged contact and so on. And every single time she sees them, she does something to assert control over them. And it might seem like small things to other people, but cumulatively it's very difficult for me because I'm trying to maintain a positive relationship. And it's hard for the girls because they get really confused about why Nana says certain things and does certain things. Obviously, it must be extremely difficult for my husband, who feels torn between his mom, who has put him in this position, and me, who he had vowed to stand by regardless. However, every single time that a conflict came up, he chose to appease his family instead of me. After 12 years of marriage, it just got too much, so last year in the summer, I said exactly that. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. He needed to change, and he needed to do it now. He needed to start standing up for me. He needed to start standing up for his family. He needed to start showing his mom that her behaviors were inappropriate, and telling her that this was our family, and we make the decisions. We are the parents, not her, and so on. But 8 months after I essentially gave him an ultimatum to start standing up to his mom, come February, he still hadn't done any of it. He still hadn't addressed with he the abuse that his family singled me out for and the way that she has treated our children. He didn't respect his own family, me and the girls, enough. And so in February this year, I eventually said, enough's enough. We are done. I want to separate. I can't do this anymore. He accepted the role that his mom has played in ending our relationship, but still to this day, and we've been separated for 6 months, Still to this day, he has not addressed it with his mom. He talks about the things that he's done, the part that he's played in our separation. I've said to him, quite clearly, if we were to get divorced, if we were to draw out papers for getting a divorce, I would be naming the reason for our divorce as his family, his mom. The constant abuse that I have suffered as a result and his lack of emotional support against all types of abuse from his family, and that it's not just the verbal abuse and the manipulation and so on, it's the financial abuse as well. She has abused us financially. We bought our old house for £220,000 in 2017 and I spent 5 years decorating, renovating, overhauling the garden, all by my hands. I did all the interior design, everything, and we made £85,000 profit on that house. And that allowed us to pay off most of our mortgage, and we were planning on downsizing for a while. While I wasn't working, I had to give up work due to my daughter's disabilities to become a full-time carer, and we had another baby just before COVID. We were planning on having a fresh start, away from our difficult neighbors that made our lives hell during lockdown and so on, but instead along the way, Emile decided that she too wanted to downsize and that it would be a good idea for us to buy her house so that she could downsize. And that way, she wouldn't have to put it on the market, and that way, it would save everyone a whole lot of hassle, supposedly. She convinced my husband that it would be easier this way. And I admit I saw some benefits in it, in the sense that it would be a familiar house for the girls, and the transition would technically be a little bit easier because we could have a crossover for moving houses and not panic moving in one day. However, despite paying the market value, despite us saying that we needed extra time to move in gradually and so on, we planned a 3-month transition, and despite this, on the day that we were meant to move in, Emile still had not finished packing, never mind moving her stuff. Everything was left in a horrible condition. Broken, damaged, sticky, disgusting mess everywhere. It was in a horrible, horrible condition, and I had to spend weeks cleaning, ripping up, removing. It was worse than I could possibly have imagined, and it made the fact that she had hoodwinked us into this so much harder, because she knew that her grandchildren were going to be living there, and she still left in that state. She chose to put us in that position. We were moving into a house that was not habitable. It was not fit for purpose. It certainly wasn't fit for children. Months and months and months it took us to get into any sort of habitable condition, and we spent over £30,000 trying to get that into just a livable condition. During this whole process, my husband was meant to be getting his inheritance from his gran, around £67,500 from joint property inheritance with his sister. But in order to do that, his mom, who was in charge of the estate, had to go to the lawyers, had to get the deeds changed over. We were waiting on that money so that we could start living comfortably, because that was the whole point in downsizing. We had spent all our money paying off the mortgage and moving house. We had no money left, and I wasn't working. And so, his mom lent him half the inheritance, and this was agreed before we'd moved into her house. But we then had to use that money in order to get the house up to any sort of livable standard. So we spent that £30,000 on the house because of her conscious choice to leave it that way. When the inheritance finally came through, Emile demanded that money back immediately. She had no comprehension of the fact that we had just spent £30,000 on her house that she had left us in that state. She demanded the loan money back immediately. I was very upset about this. I had been to the inheritance lawyers trying to chase it up for months previously, but she told the lawyer he was not allowed to talk to me. Nobody had been doing anything about it, except me, but she banned me from being involved, and eventually when they did get around to doing it, the second that we got that money in, she demanded it back. But by this point, we had racked up a whole load of debt, so we had to use the other £30,000 to pay off our debt, which left us with nothing essentially. That meant that for the last 2 years, we have been struggling financially. I'm on benefits. Husband's salary only just pays the mortgage and the bills. We've been living very uncomfortably, despite supposedly buying her house to have an easier life. His family had been living the life of Riley. They were comfortably living off this inheritance, and we have been struggling to get by. Not only that, we decided last year, when I gave him an ultimatum, we decided that we were putting our house on the market and we were going to try and get it sold. However, The problems in the house that still exist have prevented us from selling the house. I'm still living with him as a result. I can't go anywhere until the house is sold. I gave up my career for the family, so I can't get my own mortgage. We have not been able to sell the house, and so essentially the money that we've put into making that house livable, it looks like we're not even going to be able to recoup that in a sale because the house is not marketable at that price. So essentially we have lost everything by buying that house with all the profit that we've made, all the financial progress that we've made. We have lost everything by buying that house from his mom. And nobody, not one person, has acknowledged the part that she played in that. Essentially, the resentment that I feel for his family has resulted in me leaving him. It's not the only reason, but every other reason still comes back to him and the apron strings. I no longer want to be with him. I no longer want to be in a partnership with him because I feel like he is always going to choose his family over me. He is always going to take their side, and he is never going to hold his mom accountable for the damage that she's done to us. I want him to get better, if he can, and that's why I went for separation instead of straight to divorce. But I don't necessarily believe that he can or will anymore. Words mean nothing to me anymore, because he keeps on saying, I'll talk to her. I'll talk to her. I'll hold her accountable. I will ask her to apologize. I will do this. I'll do that. But it's just words. It never ever amounts to anything, and his mom has no idea. It is my belief that his mother is a narcissist, and I believe that he is the victim of narcissistic child abuse. I believe that the reason he cannot stand up to her, and the reason that he cannot hold her accountable is because she has designed it that way. I am perpetually stuck in this abusive situation, and it can't go on. Yesterday was the final straw for me. This is one example of how my children have been affected, but I can't repeat all of them. I'd be here forever. This should give an indication of why I finally snapped. Emil picked up No 3, age 4, from nursery, drove her to our house at 2.45, then made her sit in the car with no phone, no interaction, no activities, no snacks, no drinks, no fresh and no toilets. When No 3 asked to go outside to go to the toilet, she'd given up asking to go inside the unlocked house by that point. Emil apparently told her that if she left the car, she'd lock her out and she'd catch a cold in the rain. No 3 then peed and pooed her pants and cried herself to sleep in the car. No one came home from school at 3.25, and instead of letting her go inside for her tablet, which she needs to regulate after school, she's autistic, Emil put her in her car where a soiled No 3 was sleeping, then made her sit in silence while she herself scrolled on her phone. Again, no drinks, no snacks, no toilet. And when no one asked why she wasn't allowed to go into the house, Emil said, "Because your mom is late and I'm busy." Just to clarify, I wasn't meant to be at home until 4.30, and I wasn't even meant to be responsible for the kids. It was husband's responsibility to have the kids after school. When I finally got home at 4.15, she had the cheek to ask me where I'd been, and I told her I was at the pre-planned appointment with No 2 at the hospital and wasn't even due to be back for another 15 minutes. And even if it had been a normal school day, I still wouldn't have been back at that time anyway, as I travel quite a distance with No 2 for her school run. I had no way of knowing that Emil would be sitting there waiting for me because she hadn't contacted me in any way. Had she contacted me, I'd have told her the house was unlocked, so just to take them in for the toilet. And also that husband had specifically told her to take the girls back to her house because he wasn't going to be home till at least 4.30 as well. She then left in a huff and left me to clean up a distraught No 3 and deal with no one's inevitable meltdown on my own. I then asked husband to deal with his mom as soon as he got home. This simply couldn't keep happening, the way she was treating me and the kids. And when he phoned her up, he said in a jolly tone of voice, "Hi, Mom. How are you? Blah, blah. Yes, the kids are fine. Okay, bye." So I've asked him for a divorce because separation isn't going to help what can't be changed. And I've had it up to here with his mom and him for not dealing with it properly. He got really upset and left to go talk to his mom. He came back and said he was really firm with her. By this he meant he'd said that he knew it was just a mistake that she'd done that to the kids. It wasn't. He didn't want to upset her. She should be upset. It's child abuse. We needed to trust anyone looking after the kids, and it couldn't happen again. It would. Gosh, she made that choice. It wasn't an accident. He didn't mention me at all apparently, despite the fact that he should 100% have ripped her a new one for daring to blame me in front of my children for something she was actively choosing to do to them. I know I'm not in the wrong. I've had the patience of a saint putting up with her for nearly 2 decades, and I'm not sorry for asking for a divorce. In fact, it's a relief. But my kids are forever tied to her, and I will by proxy. I want nothing to do with her ever again. But I also know that she blatantly manipulated my children to think badly of me behind my back yesterday, and has done several times before. My 10-year-old middle child tells me everything, and it's honestly ridiculous. So how can I trust that his entire family isn't just going to badmouth me to my kids and put them in that horrible position of choosing sides, etc.? I've no qualms with husband getting 50:50 custody as long as he steps up and acts appropriately, sans apron strings. But I will never trust that he'll do this because she has raised him to be reliant on her. I'm so past done being his surrogate mother, so he'll automatically turn back to her. I just wish I could legally divorce her too. Anyway, that's my tale of MIL woe. Have at it.